We live in a world where there is opportunity for everyone, especially compared to what society was like 60 years ago. We are more tolerant of other cultures and ethnicities. We go to the same schools, we breathe the same air, and we all have to sleep. A lot of progress has been made to make sure that everyone is safer and leads a happier life. Before I go on praising today's society any further on its progression away from racism, let's answer this question: what is race? You would find the definition of race is the classification of humans into groups based on physical traits, ancestry, genetics, or social relation. This term was created in the early 18th century by colonists, a time when the idea of equality, justice, democracy, and human rights were becoming dominant features of society. There were still people involved in the slave trade, and in order to make sense of their actions, by saying that Africans were heathens after all, and it was a Christian's duty to save them, who else would be kind enough to civilize these savages?
Mr. O'Connor.
What is your real name?
Malcolm X.
Is that your legal name?
As far as I'm concerned, it's my legal name.
Have you been to court to establish that
I didn't have to go to court to be called Murphy or Jones or Smith. Excuse me for answering you this way.
That's
all right.
If
a Chinese person were to say his name was Patrick Murphy, you would look at him like he's insane, because Murphy is an Irish name, a European name, or the name that has a Caucasian or white background. And a yellow person, Chinese is a yellow man, and he has nothing to do or no connection whatsoever with the name Murphy. And if it doesn't look proper for a person who is yellow or Chinese to be walking around named Murphy or Jones or Johnson or Bunch or Powell, I think it would be just as improper for a black person or the so-called Negro in this country, as we're taught by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad to walk around with these names. And therefore he teaches us that during slavery, the same slave master who owned us put his last name on us to denote that we were his property. So that when you see a Negro today who's named Johnson, if you go back in his history, you'll find that he was once his grandfather, or one of his forefathers was owned by a white man who was named Johnson. If his name is Bunch, his grandfather was owned by a white man that was named Bunch.
Would you mind telling me what your father's last name was?
My father didn't know his last name. My father got his last name from his grandfather, and his grandfather got it from his grandfather, who got it from the slave master. The real names of our people were destroyed during slavery.
So how did they help civilize these savages and help them out of their current situation?
Maybe education was the answer. Help them empower themselves.
The pro-slavery governments in Europe created a racial ranking system and limited Africans and their descendants to servitude. They were saying that black people would forever be at the bottom of the social hierarchy by keeping blacks, Indians and whites socially and spatially apart and making sure only the same races mated. This ensured that visible physical differences would remain, making it easy to identify unequal social statuses. Since it was created, separation and inequality was what race was all about. The label of being the inferior race and the treatment which went along with it was also applied to free blacks as well as slaves. This made race a way in which to differentiate socially. It went past slavery and continues to be a form of social identity today.
Okay, I understand. Race was made to justify slavery, saying black people and their descendants were made to serve, and that's why we are racist, because we were taught that we are superior.
It's been 184 years since slavery ended in England, and that is plenty of time to teach society the truth about race. Schools would have taught us from a young age that people are different, but we should understand and appreciate our differences. We had enough time to be taught that Africa's history started before slavery. After slavery, the savages would have been civilized and no longer seen as a threat thanks to the colonialists of the 18th century, meaning no one group will be seen as inferior or unsociable, bringing the end of racism. Let's see how successful the government and education have been in bringing about this change. Well, they only did have 184 years.
You say what? Hello.
Hi, Oprah.
Hi.
What I'm calling about to say is I don't think I'm prejudiced, but if I would get on a bus and this gentleman, the first gentleman with the hair, would sit next to me, the way he's dressed, you,
Mr. King.
I would grab my purse and probably move to another seat. It's because of his looks. It's scary.
That's because it's out of her culture.
Well, that's interesting. Clarify, madam, what you're saying. What does the word scary mean?
Oh, gee, I don't know.
Well, now would be a very good time to figure it out.
Well,
does the word scary mean? That is my question.
Well, you would frighten me.
I understand that.
General.
What does the word scary mean? Or, same question, why would I frighten you? I haven't been in a fight since I was in 8th grade.
Well, you're probably not normally dressed up in a suit. You just look like you're a tough guy.
If she went to Jamaica, she'd be frightened all the time.
Well, madam, let me then answer the question.
So what is it? Is it because of the way he's dressed, the color of his skin, or his hair? Is it his hair?
Yes, yes. And I'm sure he's not always dressed in a suit. You know, he'll
so does that mean you're frightened of all men who are not dressed in suits?
No, no.
Okay.
It's just the garb, I think, that would scare me.
Well, you know, this is interesting, madam. Let me then advance this point. I speak of the old racism, which was pre-Dr. Martin Luther King. I then speak of the new racism. One of the things you have to understand about racists or about yourself is racists are inherently intellectual cowards. They won't come out and say, I hate niggers because I hate niggers. Story over. What they will do is take pseudo-facts. They will take facts that are not true and use that as the intellectual pyramid to come to a conclusion that is inaccurate. If you actually want to talk about the statistics, if you are afraid of me on that bus, I don't ride on buses, because you think I'm going to murder you, there is no statistical basis for that. You are more likely to be murdered by your husband, by your son, by your brother. If you are afraid of me sitting next to you on that bus that I don't ride on, because you are afraid that I'm going to rape you, statistically, your boyfriend, your husband, is more probably going to be the rapist. So I'm saying you are the manifestation of the new racism, and you have used the same pseudo-intellectual statistics to construct a racist position.
Thank you, caller. I'm sure you didn't know you did all that with one phone call.
This is the town of High Wycombe in 1936. Here is this lovely town today. This is 184 years after slavery. It's lovely to see a lot has changed. People from all backgrounds share the same pavement. It seems that racism is really a thing of the past.
Do you believe that racism still exists?
Definitely. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
What is racism?
Racism is when someone, to me, that don't like the colour of your skin or don't like where you come from.
Well, race is all based on different things, isn't it? I mean, some people, they go racist on your colours and religions and all that. I mean, we had a guy standing down at school about 6 weeks ago, standing on top of a car shouting, I hate you Muslims, I hate you Muslims.
I don't believe it's just about colour.
And you'll find it more in the older people than you will in youngsters, because youngsters are brought up with it.
And somebody's new in my class, new people, I play with them.
Were you taught about racism in school?
Not really. We didn't have many different ethnic minorities in that when I was at school.
No, when we used to go, I mean, that's about 30 years ago now.
No, not when I was young, no. They did not bring it up, nothing at all.
Historically, what do you know about black people?
The ironic thing is, we brought the black people over in the 1950s and 60s as labour to help with work and everything, as a cheap labour.
Oh my goodness, the dreadful way that they've always been treated.
I know we were slaves because they put us like Caribbean islands and other places to be, you know, yeah, we were slaves.
Slave trade and goodness knows what.
They are good labours, same as Polish or any minority. The only thing is that we brought them over to start with, so it was where we're outdated or outnumbered with a lot of them, it's down to our own society.
Do you know that the ancient Egyptians founded a university, democracy, modern agricultural techniques, and basically laid the foundations down for modern civilization? Did you know that?
No, I didn't know that. No.
I thought that was the Romans.
No, I didn't know that.
Would you believe me if I told you that the ancient Egyptians were black?
No, you wouldn't know that.
No, didn't know that at all.
Of course it should. They should let you know from what the history, because people, especially a lot of, shall I tell you something, a lot of black people, like my mum, she doesn't know our history.
If you look at Wycombe's population of blacks and other ethnic minority groups, It's the largest in Buckinghamshire at 12%, so the people would be interacting with other groups more, making it necessary for people to understand each other in order to coexist harmoniously.
But there seems to be a disconnect between the racial groups.
Not to worry, in High Wycombe they've tried to remedy racial inequality through the WREC, which was the Wycombe Racial Equality Council. Their mission was to help minorities feel less alienated in the community through connecting the diverse communities with each other, which would in turn reduce conflict and distrust in the district. Its role was pivotal in the community. It gave a helping hand and gave free advice to racial minorities. It was closed in March 2011 due to the funding being cut. It was no longer a priority.
I would have thought things would have been better. A lot more change should have been made by now. It's been 184 years.
Rome was not built in a day, and it's not the education system's job to inform society on topics which allow us to still be divided. And it's not the education system's job to ensure that we are informed on how the Greeks, who were considered the most intelligent people on earth at one point in time, travelled to Africa and attended Egyptian universities in order to learn mathematics. And it's not the system that we were in for 14 years of our life's job to explain that these Greek intellectuals wrote that the natives of Egypt were dark, with wide noses and woolly hair. Imagine a land which created mathematics, accounting, paper, astronomy, and many other things that impact us today. Now imagine their descendants being labelled as uneducated savages who are good for nothing but servitude.
No society would miss that bit out of a people's history. We have thoroughly taught about the Western history and how the West helped everyone. Why would they miss out how much we learnt and took from Africa?
It's not the educational system's job to educate us on that. In order to move forward, we should first think about what prejudices we hold on other groups, read or watch videos on what other groups have accomplished to help society, and lastly, talk to real people from other groups and ask how they are treated differently from us, so that we can understand our differences. These easy steps will help us appreciate our differences, because we are different, but we can all be more equal.